Welcome to the Making Hay podcast with Marcia Miller from RFG Advisory. In this podcast, we help veterinarians, from new graduates to seasoned practitioners, navigate the sometimes tricky waters of personal finance. We all know the saying, making hay while the sun shines. As cheesy as it sounds, it represents a lot of what we help people do in their financial lives and businesses. We know each of you faces unique challenges, and we're here to offer advice tailored just for you, anchored in service, stewardship, and a genuine understanding of your profession. Join Marcia Miller, your guide on this journey. Marcia has spent over 25 years in financial services, and her passion is helping vets like you get a handle on your finances. Tune into each episode as we meet at the intersection of veterinary practice and financial management. With help from expert guests and insights from Marcia's own experience, we're going to tackle your biggest financial questions head on.
Hello, and welcome to the Making Hay podcast with your host, Marcia Miller. Marcia, you've been very busy since the last time we spoke. How you been?
I am good. I'm good. It's great to see you, Bill. But you are correct. I've got Matt and Byars here on my team with me today. And you are correct. We have been very, very busy. Last couple of weeks, Matt and I have been traveling to veterinary conferences. We went to the WVC conference in Vegas a week before last, had a great time. It's like the second largest veterinary conference. So I don't know, 20,000 or so people there. And then this past week, Thursday through Saturday night late, we were in Nashville at the Music City Veterinary Conference. So we've been having a great time.
Keep Vegas. I'll take Nashville every time.
It was good and around good people. That's the important thing.
Exactly. It is the important thing. So what are we talking about today?
Yeah. So today we are starting a 3-part series, and it's going to be on the 3 phases of retirement. So accumulation phase, pre-retirement phase, and then the retirement phase. So today we're going to be talking about the accumulation phase. And after our time at these conferences, Matt and I felt these are really like topics our veterinary niche needs to hear. These are questions we're getting from them at these conferences. These are things that they're interested in. So we wanted to dive into that.
Excellent. Well, dive away.
We'll start with the financial foundations, maybe 2 to 3 things that you should do first. And we feel like number 1, it's the emergency plan. Matt, what advice can you give a veterinarian? And of course, this podcast for accumulation is for veterinarians that are in their 20s, 30s, and 40s. So these are the people that are working, they're accumulating. They need to be accumulating if they're not. Step 1 is that emergency fund.
Yeah, that's a good question. And we actually had this conversation a lot over the last couple of weeks. Several students and graduates like, hey, I just graduated or graduating in May. I'm going to start earning income in June. Like, what is step 1? And we recommend 3 months of savings just in a bank. And this is just basic expenses. So if you take 3 months of your rent or mortgage, and just kind of necessary spending like groceries, insurance, things like that, just 3 months or so should be in a bank, easily accessible just in case of any unforeseen emergencies.
Yeah. And once you hit that 3 months, I know kind of a trend we see a lot of times in our office and talking to people virtually is that maybe they get into their 30s and 40s or even their 20s. A lot of times they've got $70,000 sitting in their savings account, and Matt and I both were cringing.
Yes, please do not do that.
Yes, do not have your money working for you and sitting in the bank making 0 or 0.5% or 0.25% is not working for you.
Yes.
So do not be overly crazy. And the other thing we get is, well, it's not a good time to invest. The market's crazy. The market is volatile, over the last few years. And what happened last year, Matt?
Yeah, I mean, we had a year of high volatility, but I mean, if you just kind of kept your head down and stuck to your plan, the S&P was up around 25% last year. Nobody knows what's going to happen, but we do know that sticking to a plan over 10, 20, 30 years, we've seen the proven results of how that works out for people.
Absolutely. So you get your emergency fund and you don't overfund your emergency fund. Next step is we always like to talk about debt. What do you have going on in debt? And I know a few episodes ago, I don't know if it was 7 or 8, but you and I did a great podcast together on student loan debts. And that's something we're asked about all the time too, as you mentioned, at these conferences, as we're engaging with people and talking to people. It's top of mind. And we just had a conversation with someone recently that's a new grad, $350,000 in student loan debt, starting a job, getting married, and wanted a plan of action. That's important. And that's something that we can help you with, but also other debt. If you have car loan debt, if you're getting a mortgage right now, or if you have a mortgage, all those things play into the financial foundations. I was talking to actually a member of my family, actually my son, who has a growing family and would love to look at getting a bigger house, a bigger yard. He's got 2 kids now to run around in. He's like, there's no way I'm doing that because I've got a 2.75 mortgage. I happen to buy at the perfect time. We are happy to be thinking partners and help guide you in that direction. Like, don't make a mistake of trying to rush into a bigger home when it's not the right time to do that.
Absolutely. That's a really good story. And I think just to add on to that, there's no one size fits all plan. Like, everybody we speak to has a different situation or different goals. And so it's good to just, again, like you said, use a thinking partner to talk through this.
Yeah, absolutely. If we go into like investments now, one of the first things that people think about when they are thinking about, hey, I have some extra money, what is the first step I need to do? It's to look and see if they're offered a 401k or a simple plan or any type of retirement plan at work. That's kind of the first, what we call a no-brainer, especially if whether you're a practice owner or an associate, if you've got a 401k plan that is available to you, if there is a match, it's an absolute must that you take that and at least invest that match. If it's a 3% match, or if you're lucky to have maybe a 5% match, that's free money on the table. Even if there's a vesting schedule, which just simply means, if you work as an associate for a doctor and you decide to go to a different hospital, then you may not be able to take that with you if you're not fully vested, maybe a 2-year, 3-year, or even 5-year period. But we highly encourage you to contribute immediately day one into that 401k plan. What's the maximum that someone could put into their 401k plan? People talk about the minimum, but how much can they really put away? I think it's a pretty huge number. I love to talk about that.
Yeah, of course. So for 2024, the max an employee can contribute is $23,000.
Under age 50, because that's
under
who we're
age
talking
50.
today.
Yes, that's correct. And then for those over age 50, there's a catch up. And so it's $30,500 for this year, 2024.
So if you're a super aggressive saver, there's a lot of room there to save. But I think one thing that's not talked about when you talk about investing in your 401k, which again, we think this is just a foundation, like you have to do it. The 3 things you have to do: emergency fund, get your debt in order, and sign up for your 401k. But a lot of things that a lot of times people aren't asking because they don't know to ask, is there a Roth option? And even the practice owner, if you don't have a Roth option on your 401k plan, then we need to talk about getting that set up for you. Because if you could put $23,000 or $30,500 towards retirement, that's tax-free, or even a portion of it, put it Roth, but the other portion of it traditional, it would be a game changer for you over the course of your career.
Right. The reason that we recommend that, and so for those that aren't familiar with Roth IRAs, when the money goes in, when you contribute, so you do not get a tax deduction. So that is money that we've already paid taxes on. But on the back end, all of that growth and gains that we have in the account, when we pull it out in retirement, it is tax-free, which is very valuable because we don't have to worry about taxes or anything like that in retirement. So those dollars are very, very valuable.
Absolutely. A lot of times I run into people who might be working with an advisor who is either retirement focused and they're at that time talking about Roth IRAs. But because we do work with younger clients as well as older clients, and we work with clients in these accumulation phase, we want to make sure that we're talking about the types of money. And that is something that takes a little bit of education if you've not been exposed to it, but don't be intimidated by it. We're kind of doing a brief overview today, but we will break it down. We'll give you literature to read. We'll make sure you understand the choices there. But what we don't want to do on our watch is work with a 35-year-old veterinarian and we get them to age 55, 65, whatever, when they want to step back and they've put all their money into traditional pre-tax dollars, because it then becomes a tax nightmare. We're not going to talk more about that today because, as I said, this is a 3-part series. And we have more to come on that topic in the next 2 episodes. But good stuff there. Thanks for breaking that down.
Yeah, absolutely.
Sometimes I, like other financial advisors, I talk fast, and I think people know everything that I know in my head. And accumulation phase, these are people are learning. They're learning how to invest. And that's
Right.
what this whole episode is about today.
Right.
The next thing I want to talk about is kind of a rule of thumb. I love this rule of thumb because I like empowering people to make proper investment choices. And it's the 50-30-20 rule of investing. What that means is the 50% of your money should be allocated. And we're talking about your bring home paycheck should be allocated to your needs. Rent, your mortgage, your life insurance premium, your gasoline, and that kind of thing, the things that you have to have, food. And then the 30% is your wants, and you don't hear financial advisors a whole lot talking about this because we're notorious for trying to crack the whip, I guess you could say, and don't spend your money, save, right? But I think, and maybe as a woman, I like this more because, women, we like to shop. And I think it's empowering to say, hey, it's okay to shop and spend money on what you want. Get a horse if you want to, if it's in your 30% budget, whatever it is that you want to do with your discretionary money, there's freedom in knowing and budgeting that in. And then the last 20% is savings. Of your bring home money, make sure you're taking 20% and saving. And we're going to tell you where to put that money as we go forward. What's the best place so we talked about you funding your 401k. Matt, where do we go next with that 20%?
Yeah, that's a great question. The next steps would be to just open up an individual or joint investing account. The reason for that is we'll see a lot higher growth rates over several years than we would in that emergency fund at the bank. And what this money will do will fund your future goals. If you're saving up to try to buy a practice or a house or whatever that may be, that money is working for you and it's liquid. We don't have any surrender periods or guidelines from the government when we can touch that money. So if we find a house we like or find a practice we like, that money is there ready to go.
Right. And we failed to mention the IRS imposed limit on taking money out of your 401k. And so that is age 59 and a half. All that money going into your 401k, if you pull it out for any reason, maybe you're changing jobs and the money becomes available to roll over or whatever. If you take that money out, there is a substantial tax penalty because this money is geared towards retirement. It's what the IRS intends for this money to be used for. So if you pull it out, and there are a few exceptions that we won't really go into today, but that is why it's so important to do what you just said, Matt, to have that individual account, whether it's, individual or joint. If you have a spouse or significant other that you want to have a joint account with, that it's super important to have money that you have access to. And that can also even be considered part of your emergency fund. We were having a conversation the other day, Matt. And I think that this bears a good place to talk about it. People are so bent out of shape, especially the older they get. We have clients coming in here. I mean, we've seen people with $1 million sitting in the bank. And we just lose our brain about that because we know what we could do for them, right? We know what mistake they're making. But people just get like, well, I just want to have access to this money. For what? What are you going to pull $1 million out for? What in the world? Even if you have like a $30,000 emergency fund, I know I just recently had to do 2 or 3 things to my house. Had to get a hot water heater, had to get things that happen in life. And you know what I did? I pulled out my Home Depot card and got 6 months interest free. I didn't touch my emergency fund. So we think that's definitely a mistake.
I think my challenge for people that like that much cash or just like that much security is, when is the last time that you've had an expense that was over $30,000 or $40,000? And more times than not, it's just not something that we experience in our lifetimes.
Right. And even if you know that like, hey, I'm going to need a new roof in a few years, your portfolio, we can plan for that. You know, as long as you communicate with us, which we're very good at asking questions when we have reviews with our clients, we pretty much know what's going on. Typically a roof, we know when our roof is wearing out, and that could be a big expense. But you're right. People, I dare to say there's not more than a $3,000 to $5,000, maybe your refrigerator breaks would be an example ever. But again, I'd pull my Home Depot card out and I would get 6 months interest free and I would pay that out of my income. But that's just me. I think that's smart, but that bears talking about today.
Yeah, absolutely.
What about risk, Matt? We're talking now to people in the accumulation phase, 20s, 30s, and 40s. they're not immune to feeling uneasy with what's happened in the market the last few years, really since COVID, and the market has been volatile. And we see a lot of people at this stage of life that are too conservative in their risk tolerance in their portfolio.
Yeah, I think there's a couple of things that we see, and I think the biggest mistake to investors everywhere in this accumulation phase is they prioritize income over growth way too soon. If we're not pulling income out of our portfolio and we're in our 20s and 30s, we're not pulling income out of our portfolio for at least 20 to 30 years. Why would I trade an income portfolio that's yielding around 4% over a growth portfolio that over 30 years will average around 10%? It just doesn't make a whole lot of sense to me.
We just help educate our clients on that. Make sure you're working with a financial advisor to understand your risk preference, but also, is your risk preference in line with your time, your stage of life, your time horizon, and things like that. So very important. And we have tools to help you understand that. In my opinion, and it's not just my opinion, it's factual. If you look at the last 100 years of the stock market, it's the greatest wealth creation tool that exists, period. The challenge is knowing when to pull money out. So you've got to have, and we'll talk about that on our next episode, having different buckets of money for different uses and stages of life. But definitely don't shoot yourself in the foot by saying, I don't know, I'm too scared to invest, or I don't know what I'm doing. That's not a good excuse. Let us help you understand what you're doing. You don't have to know before you come talk to us, but definitely don't be too conservative.
Yes, exactly. And I think another big risk component to the accumulation phase is families that have a single income, or if your practice is your only source of income for your family, what happens if something happens to you? Is your family going to be taken care of just if the worst case scenario happens and you were to suffer a heart attack or something like that? I think life insurance, just to cover us in this accumulation phase, is very important. And it's something that is pretty cheap to cover that base as well.
Absolutely. And that's on our list. I mean, we have a checklist that we run down when when we're talking to any client. If you don't have that in place, we can, help facilitate that. We can shop around for it for you so that it is kind of painless. And if you procrastinate that a little bit, we're going to circle back at our next meeting and say, hey, did you take care of that life insurance, so that we can make sure that is in place properly?
Yes. And it's not something fun to talk about. Like, nobody likes to plan around their own death, but it's definitely a necessity in this accumulation phase.
And speaking about insurance, I always like to say that health and wealth go hand in hand. It really does at all ages. It's just like if you're going to invest on a monthly basis into your 401k and portfolio, then you're going to wake up when you get older and you're going to have money accumulated and you're going to be in good financial health. But if you don't eat right and you don't exercise, then what good is saving all the money? Because we want you to have the chance to retire young if you can, retire early if you can, if that's what you want to do, so that you can enjoy your life. We want you to have the money, but we also want you to have the health to enjoy it.
I think that's been some of the best advice that I've received in the last year. Is we're doing all of this planning and saving and making sacrifice for our future. But what are you doing to ensure that you're going to live a long life and enjoy it? And really just taking care of yourself, going to the gym, exercising, and eating healthy is equally as important to what we do as financial advisors.
Definitely. Another thing I wanted to mention today was make sure that our listeners understand, especially our accumulation phase listeners, understand the time value of money. This is like such a cool story here. So Matt, give us the numbers behind a 25-year-old investing versus a 50-year-old investing.
Yeah, and I think the purpose of this is just to emphasize how important it is to get started young. I mean, most people in their 20s are not considering a retirement. I mean, that's 30 or 40 years away. I'm not worried about it, and we'll just kind of have their head in the sand. But understanding the time value of money is really eye-opening to just how important it is when time is on your side. Taking a look at an individual at age 25, investing $1,000 a month for 40 years at an average annual return of 7%.
Which is super conservative, by the way.
Super conservative, yes. Is $2.6 million at age 65. Just having that plan, adding those contributions on a systematic basis over 40 years will get you $2.6 million, which is a great amount in retirement. taking a look at somebody that has not started saving for retirement at age 55, to get that same portfolio value in retirement at age 65, we would need to contribute $15,000 a month at an average annual return of 7%.
Wow.
So that is substantially more for somebody that waited 30 years to age 55 to get going.
Absolutely. It goes back to the health. You've got to exercise on a consistent basis and eat right. Yes, we can have our times where we eat cake and splurge and have pizza, but we still have to be on that consistent path. And it's the same thing with our money. So I love that. I love that our listeners are learning how to make good choices, but what that brings is freedom. What's the purpose of saving all this money? It's for freedom. It's for choices. It's so that we can live our life without, what would you do in your life if you had the money to do it when you're 40 years old? I don't know. That's what we're here to empower our clients and listeners to make those proper choices. Well, we're going to wrap up now. And just basically today, we talked about the financial foundations, the things that you have to do, the emergency fund, get your debt in line, start your 401k. After that, getting a solid personal savings plan going so that you have money accumulating for future needs. If you want to buy a practice or buy a car, or whatever it is, making sure your risk is in line with what it needs to be, not necessarily what you feel all warm and fuzzy about, because the market may not always feel warm and fuzzy, right? So we want to make sure that you're doing the right things for your age. And then just being consistent, just like with your health, be consistent with your finances. Next week, what are we going to talk about?
We are going to talk about the pre-retirement phase. So for those individuals that are getting a little bit closer to retirement, maybe 50, 55, and what to kind of expect and think about as we enter into those crucial retirement years.
Fantastic. I can't wait.
No, neither can anybody else. Okay. Just on the record, I've covered financial markets for many years. I don't recall the markets ever, Marcia, being warm and fuzzy, but
right.
For those people who are listening today who were thinking maybe you've said a couple of things that they would like to have further conversation with you about, how do they reach out to you? How do they get in contact with you?
Yeah. So our office line is 205-795-2013. My direct line, my cell phone is 205-739-1928. We're here to help you. Our website is meetwithmarcia.com and Marcia is Marcia, and that brings you to our whole team page. So those are the ways to find us.
That sounds excellent. And for people who are listening who are not subscribers, this is an easy thing to do. Hit the subscribe button there. Now you don't have to worry about where or when you heard this or when it comes out. You will be notified automatically whenever Marcia puts out a new episode of Making Hay. It's really quite simple. We'd also ask that if you enjoy this podcast, like it and tell people about it. Help spread the word about Making Hay, if you will. Until next time, I'm Bill Tucker on behalf of everybody at Making Hay and on behalf of Marcia Miller. Thank you for listening. And we remind you that you can go out today and make today a great day or not. It's your choice. Thank you so much for listening. Until next time.
Thank you for listening to the Making Hay podcast. Click the follow button to be notified when new episodes become available. Visit our website at meetwithmarcia.com or give us a call at 205-795-2013. And don't forget to click the follow button to be notified when new episodes become available. Content here is for illustrative purposes and general information only. It is not legal, tax, or individualized financial advice, nor is it a recommendation to buy, sell, or hold any specific security or engage in any specific trading strategy. Results will vary. Past performance is no indication of future results or success. Market conditions change continuously. This commentary reflects the personal opinions, viewpoints, and analyses of Marcia Miller. It does not necessarily represent those of RFG Advisory, their clients, or their employees. This commentary should not be regarded as a description of advisory services provided by Marcia Miller or RFG Advisory, or performance returns of any client. The views reflected in the commentary are subject to change at any time without notice. Advisory services offered by investment advisory representatives or RFG Advisory LLC, RFG Advisory or RFG, a registered investment advisor. Advisory services are only offered to clients or prospective clients where RFG Advisory and its representatives are properly licensed or exempt from licensure. No advisory services may be rendered by RFG Advisory unless a client agreement is in place.